Due to the paucity of time, we are starting with our next session now, Changing Trends in Asian Textile and Apparel Trade. May I call upon stage the chairman of the session, Mr. V.K. Singh, Special Secretary, Ministry of Textiles. The moderator of the session, Dr. Christian Schindler, the Director General of International Textile Manufacturers Federation. Thank you. The panelists, Mr. Justin Huang, Mr. Rakesh Wazirani, Mr. Shivendra Parmar. Sorry, with a virtual mode, many a time you also get confused on. So the other panelists are joining us virtually. A brief introduction to our session chair, moderator, and the panelists. Mr. V.K. Singh, many of us know, is the Special Secretary in the Ministry of Textiles from the Punjab cadre. In fact, he has a vast experience ranging from the finance, expenditure, dairy and agriculture, irrigation and flood control, and food and civil supplies, health, industry, and commerce. Our moderator of the session, the Director General of International Textile Manufacturers Federation, ITMF. The ITMF was founded in 1904 and is headquartered in Switzerland. Dr. Schindler was appointed the economist with the ITMF in 2004 and since then has been promoted to the position of director. At the Federation's annual conference in Dubai in September 2006, he was nominated and elected as the Director General in 2007. Besides this, we are joining virtually with Mr. Justin Huang, who is the President of Taiwan Textile Federation. Mr. Justin plays an important role in the well-known international organizations. During the last few years, he has been representing Taiwan in several international organizations like the ITMF, the IAF, the United States Fashion Industry Association, USFIA, the Global Apparel, Footwear and Textile Initiative, the European Apparel and Textile Confederation, Euratex, and the World Federation of Sporting Goods Industry, WFSGI. He presently is a part of the board of IAF and GAFTI. We also welcome the chairman of Sri Lanka Apparel Exporters Association, Executive Director, Mr. Hirdamani from the Hirdamani Group. Mr. Arun Hirdamani is the chairman of the Sri Lanka Apparel Exporters Association and a member of the Young Presidents Organization and is the Consul General of Guatemala in Sri Lanka. In 2016, he was selected to the Forum of Young Global Leaders by the World Economic Forum. We also have with us Mr. Rakesh Wazirani, who is the Head of Sustainability Services Business Unit. Mr. Rakesh Wazirani has 15 years of experience with the TUV. He is a qualified personnel for ESG planning and disclosure. He has executed successful multi-year projects within international agencies like GIZ and WWF. We also have Mr. Shivendra Parmar, Senior Manager, TUV Rhineland. Mr. Parmar is a Senior Manager with TUV Rhineland and he is an experienced national technical manager in the field of quality assessment of garment, leather, and home textiles. With these short introduction, may I request the Special Secretary, Mr. Vijay Kumar Singh, to kindly chair the session and start the proceedings. Sir.
I thank Citi for inviting me to chair this session. I welcome Mr. Schindler, who is DG of International Textile Manufacturers Federation. I am very keen to hear what his views also during the session. But since I was present in the previous session, I had a lot of views regarding that topic. The international trend, I don't treat myself as an expert in this field, but what I feel that the basic trend is that the buyers are opting for China plus one policy. Definitely there is a pushback. China has got its export increase in last year, but overall trend, I still see that that is a trend we should look at, because that is in our interest also. And what I feel one of the reason for getting the buyer reverting back to China must be that we have not been able to give them opportunity. So it's a basically point of introspection for all of us. We, from the government side, we feel that we have done a lot in recent times. The government has done quite a bit, but still I will never say that there is no scope for doing more. I understand that we can do much more also, and we are also acting on those lines. But similarly, the industry should also introspect and feel that what are the reason that we are not able to compete even with the Bangladesh. You go to Bangladesh, there is a lot of investors are from our country. The managers, so many large number of NIFT graduates and all, the merchandising and all those things are being done by people from India. Even the consultants, our consulting organizations, they are going and they are telling them and they are working on those things. So why it is not happening, we should see that. We all know the facts, so I will not like to repeat that. But I have a feeling, basically, we all know that the returns of any activity comes in a manner of compounding. So if we start doing something slowly and slowly, it takes time, and then over the period, the strength can be seen. So what we are doing today may be due to some policies, regime which we followed as a nation, and which the industry also followed, because they have no option. If the government has a policy, so everybody follows that. And then we are today due to those things. So on the last 15th August, that is the 75th anniversary of our independence, Honorable Prime Minister said that he had laid a very huge target, that India has to be a developed country by 2047. And that requires something around 6 to 8% annual growth. And it will not happen if we don't have labor-intensive industry growth. And textile is a very, very major part of that labor-intensive growth. So if now there is a stated objective of the government, and now it's time for all of us to think out of box, why we are not able to do what we have not been able to do. One factor which I feel, that industry also has been basically a bit of habituated of working in the comfort zone. So you have to go beyond your comfort zone in the country itself. Yesterday Mint, I think, or a day before, I was reading an article. They were saying that a story of that Arvind Group was published, and their whole lineage have been discussed, and just see, they survived that 70s, 80s takeover boom when the 150 mills were taken over and made into public sector units, which never worked. If think of that, if they would have also been nationalized, then what would have happened? And then you think reverse, that if those 150 mills, which they would not have been taken over, then definitely out of that 50, 30, whatever, some number must have succeeded. Some of them might have failed. So where are we today is partly due to those policy initiatives, policy practices which we practiced in the past. So, but we can't do much about that. But we should not repeat the same mistakes again and again. Today, those things are history. Those are just an anecdotal thing I told, but nothing that sort of is happening. Government is totally pro-industry. Rather, what's the strength of India? India's strength is enterprising people. The entrepreneurship in this country can beat China very well. I don't think China has that enterprising class, that entrepreneurship which we have. So, but now government is clear with the policy prescription and all. So the problem which I see, that we have the entire value chain of the textile. We are very happy to make reasonable profit, but we don't have aspirations to grow faster in labor intensive segment. So even if I make a very good investment in high-tech fabric making, processing and all thing, I am very happy to make decent profit and sending my stuff to Bangladesh, where truck on the border stays for 10-15 days. And still they make profit on making a garment out of those fabric. So there must be something. No? So why are we not doing that in our own country? Labor legislation has been one problem in past, that we had some problem that we cannot maintain large labor pool in India in a big number. But today, the government is very, very clear and the new labor legislations are already in place. Many states have given all those exemptions to the textile industry. So we have to go to the labor intensive workers, to the area, the demography, where demography is suitable for textile industry. In India, there are different parts. Unfortunately, the apparel industry is in Bangalore, in NCR region, and those parts of the India where they are depending 100% of the migrant worker. So migrant worker, if you depend on migrant worker 100%, then you are going to have, it is going to be the costly. You have to make the hostels, you have to make their other arrangements, and they go back and you are not sure that they will come back to you or not. So if you are not sure, then you will not invest in their training and their skill building. So I don't take this argument that Vietnamese workers are more skilled than Indians. We can make better skilled person here if we invest in their training. But since we have a system that we are depending on migrant, we don't invest in their training, that's why they are not so productive. So the capital has to move, like the people from Japan and South Korea and coming and investing in India, people from Indian region where the demography is not suitable for apparel business must move to the area where demography is suitable. Then only you will be able to achieve the scale. After making a hostel, you can never make 30,000 machines apparel factory and all, or 50,000 machines apparel factory, which Bangladesh has done. Bangladesh has not made hostels and all. People come and go. So those type of reasons are in India waiting for capital because they don't have entrepreneurship. So those, the role of industry and all is there to meet the factor of production, the worker, labor with the capital, and then we can do that. So there is a resource lying unutilized for the industry to go and take in. And we always keep comparing the incentives and all. So those are very, very minor thing in long run. If you are able to use on the productivity of the worker and the competitiveness, natural competitiveness. And we give a lot of importance to ecosystem. Ecosystem can be built. For apparel industry, it's not a huge thing. The Gati Shakti, the roads infrastructure, the railway infrastructure of the country has developed so much that these things can be managed very easily now. If a capable organization wants to manage the supply chain for input and all, it's very easily doable. So that was one thing which I thought industry must look beyond their comfort zone. That's the idea. Then only we will be able to influence that global trend. Otherwise, global trend may pass us. And one more thing, that India's advantage of the labor demography is very temporary. It's not more than 20 years. 20 years down the line, we will be also an aging country and we will not have labor suitable for labor intensive industry, then we will have to look for some other avenue. That's my view. I thought to start the discussion, I have just shared my view. I hope Mr. Sindler will give us his sense of international trends and all, and how we can leverage on that. We have very sustainable high-tech industry in India, so so we are capable of doing what any other country has done. That's my understanding. So, Mr. Sindler, you can share your views, and then we can move forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Singh, for this introduction, which was covering a lot of topics. I will not add to that at the moment because we have 4 panelists who are joining us from different countries in Asia and who have been invited to talk about changing trends in Asian textile and apparel trade environment. I would like to start with Mr. Aaron Hindaramani from Sri Lanka. I know he's short on time because we're running late, so please, Mr. Hindaramani, share your perspective of what type of trends you have observed in the last few years, pre-pandemic and now also post-pandemic. Are there any major changes that you are observing that we here in India, but also in other countries in Asia, should be aware of, and what are the lessons to be learned from the pandemic with regard to textile manufacturing and textile trading within Asia, but also around the world? Please.
Sure, and Christian, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this panel. Yeah, I'll make it quick because I know we're a little bit pressed for time. Before I start on some of the trends that we are observing, I will quickly update on the situation here in Sri Lanka. As you know, we are in the media quite a lot because of the political and economic crisis. Thankfully, since the middle of July, we have a lot more stability over here, and we have a new president in place, and because of that, there's political stability, and in economic terms, exports have been increasing overall, and this has improved the foreign exchange situation. So there is more availability of energy and fuel, and in turn also more availability of more essential commodities. So thankfully, our economic situation is improving. There's still a lot more hard work required, and for us in the export sector, it's very important for us to continue our growth to help Sri Lanka on its recovery. And then focusing on the apparel sector, year to date, we see quite a large growth in our industry. We have over 20% year to date growth up to July. And our major trading markets are the US and the European Union countries, and we see especially growth from the US, and over 20%, and the UK market is in the mid-teens. And when you speak about trends post-COVID, obviously the sector was very disrupted during the pandemic, and there was a shift in demand for certain items. And we also had seen this shift occur a little bit pre the pandemic as well. So there's a lot more demand for synthetic fibers, and activewear and athleisure have been the fastest growing categories. And Sri Lanka is quite strong in those areas. And I think the one thing we realized that during the pandemic and since then, the supply chains have been very stressed, and the lead times have increased because of various disruptions, and we need a stronger regional supply chain for these synthetic fibers and for these kind of fabrics. And in order to have that, we need government incentives, and we need more investment. And I think a lot of that can come from the Far East as well, where traditionally the supply chain has been. So here in Sri Lanka, there is an export zone being set up for textiles, and the government is providing a number of incentives for that. And we have some Indian companies who are signed up, some companies from the Far East, as well as some local companies. So if we can increase that supply chain for these sort of fabrics, then we can respond to the consumer demands and hopefully continue that growth. And one other policy that I will add as well is that there has been, it has been spoken earlier in this discussion, the growth of countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam. And yes, there has been a lot of investment in the sector and a lot of strong government policy, which has helped. But also a key area has been trade policy. So Bangladesh has benefited greatly from, having duty-free access to the European Union, to Canada and many other countries as well. And that has allowed customers to work on long-term plans of sourcing from there and to have, incremental year-on-year growth. We see the same thing for Vietnam. They have strong, they have very strong ties with the EU and the whole ASEAN region, and that allows them to have, a real partnerships and growth with those markets. For Sri Lanka, it's crucial for us to retain the GSP Plus agreement that we have, so that we can provide the duty-free access to that region. So I think when you speak about the Indian perspective, there is a lot of talk about having a trade agreement with the EU and the UK as well, and I think that will really help to spearhead growth and will allow investment to come in, whereas people can invest in the supply chain and backward integrate, because they will have the additional support in terms of long-term demand. So these are some of the key areas that we are seeing, and we would love to collaborate more with more of the Indian manufacturers and mills, so we can help to grow this region as a key hub for the apparel sector.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether you can stay with us, but since I'm scared that you are leaving the session because of other commitments, maybe one follow-up question quickly. What role does sustainability play when you when brands and retailers are sourcing from Sri Lanka? Is this a topic that is that lets you sleep at night, or that gives you nightmares? What are the requirements going forward for apparel producers in Sri Lanka and overall in Asia? Is there something that we all have to be aware of and really take this seriously, and that this is not a fading trend, but a trend that will even intensify in the next few years?
Definitely. Yeah, it's a very it's a very pertinent topic, and Sri Lanka, fortunately, has the industry has been investing in sustainable manufacturing for over a decade, and because we are especially short of energy, we have been trying to work on energy saving metrics for our factories for a number of years. So I think we have a number of LEED certified sustainable factories that use 60% less energy than traditional factories by using solar power and other renewable energy, and less water usage as well. So I think that is one area where there's been a lot of investment, and that has rewarded us by having a lot of customers look to us when they want sustainable product. But I think the other key area now is on sustainable materials, and I think that is a much larger discussion where you need to work with the customer and the raw material suppliers to ensure that we can have some aspect of recycled materials in the finished product, and be it both synthetics and natural fibers. So that is an area where we are scaling, but it's still in its early stages. So it's a very important topic for our key customers who purchase from Sri Lanka, but we're seeing that from also the larger mass market retailers, that all consumers are looking for some sustainable aspects. So I think we need to collaborate, and we need to figure out how we can make sure the products have more of these the attributes, and it is something that keeps us up, and we're going to keep innovating on this area because of the customer demand.
Great. Thank you very much, Aaron, from Sri Lanka. Let me go on to our friend in Taiwan, Justin Wang. from the Taiwan Textile Federation. He was introduced already. He's a good friend of mine as well, and a really experienced and long-term expert in our industry. And Taiwan is especially well known for its fabric production of functional fabrics, high-value fabrics. Justin, maybe you can share with us, how Taiwan developed into that high-end producer of fabrics that you are, and maybe also share with us the trends that you are observing that are relevant for Taiwan and for any textile producing country in the future. Justin?
Welcome. Thank you very much, Christian. Very nice to see you on screen. Well, in the last, I would say 3 years, almost 3 years, during this pandemic of COVID-19, the textile industry in Taiwan has been suffered a lot, particularly in the year 2020. Many of their production line in Southeast Asian countries, for example, in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Indonesia, they got orders postponed or canceled during the year 2020. So most of the production line were shifted to do cloth masks, as well as to do protection gowns for medical use. So that was more or less a little bit help to these garment industries. For the fabric industries in Taiwan, because the order was canceled or postponed, the only thing what we can do is to keep on the efforts on the innovation. Innovation on the, for example, we make use of digitalization into our management systems. Many of the leading mills in Taiwan, they have headquarters in Taiwan and overseas manufacturing network in Southeast Asia and also in Africa. So such digital tools has been adopted into the headquarters and their overseas factories in the last 2 years, which did help a lot for gaining the business in the year 2021. So that's why last year our export value reached the same level as 2019. So such digitalization, I would like to point out that there are two things we have been done. The first one is the management systems for finance and for quality control between the headquarters and overseas facilities. And the second is to use these digital tools to communicate with their clients, particularly in the field with new sample development and checking. In the past, for each new items, when they deal with their client, they would need 6 times for sample making. But when they install these new digital tools, most of them give me a response. First sample making will be shifted to the clients for checking. And after 2 or 3, through the computer simulation works, it helps a lot for the suppliers to finalize the last sample making. So in one hand, the sample making works has been saved about 80% of the works. And also in the last 6 times of sample making will take 6 or 8 weeks to communicate with the client. But at the end, when the digital tool was applied, they only needed 2 weeks to finalize the sample ratifications. So this is a very good advantage when they do this work. And also, they also use this templating works through this CAD/CAM systems, and they build up this template tools in headquarters and shipped it or delivered such a template to their overseas factories for example, in Cambodia or in Vietnam. Saved also a lot of the labor's works, and also increase the productivities. The other thing is sustainability. In the last 2 years, our government has been spent a lot of budget to build up some new energy. For example, windmills, as well as the solar panels, and also this thermal plants have been changed to be using natural gas instead of coals. For natural gas, it will not generate carbon dioxide. So 50% of the thermal plants have already shifted to use the natural gas. But also we know that we're suffering about natural gas prices in the last 2 years. But anyway, it's also quite sustainable than before. For textile industries particularly, when we are doing about sustainability, we have 3 aspects to do. The first one is the material. The chemical fibers corporations, as well as filament spinners and fabric mills, they invested a lot for the recycled PET materials. Every year, we have produced 4 billion bottles in Taiwan. And 99% of those PET bottles, when they disposed, will be collected and recycled. But it was not enough because Nike, Adidas, many of these giants, they always source these recycled PET bottle materials, filament or fabrics from Taiwan. So the leading corporations of chemical fibers, they not only use the domestic disposed PET bottles, but also import from other countries. And they also worked with international NGOs to collect the ocean waste and to ship to Taiwan, and we produce PET polyester fibers and filaments and fabrics. And in the last 2 years, I will have new investments for the recycled nylon. Recycled nylon is more difficult than PET bottles because for those ocean boats, fishing boats, those fishing nets, when they are using 8 years or 10 years in the oceans, it's so dirty. It takes a lot of water resource to clean it. So we changed our directions for the recycling materials. We use the offshore fish net. Now that's maybe every 2 or 3 years they will renew it. So in Taiwan, we have Wang factories. They have already invested new factories 2 years ago. And every month, the capacity is about 500 tons per month. And by the end of this year, 2022, and the capacity will reach 1,200 tons per month. So, and they are also extending such kind of recycling service from Taiwan to Vietnam to work with the offshore offshore fishing farms to collect this disposed fishing nets. And it's very helpful for the oceans because those fishing nets usually will be disposed in everywhere, maybe in the ocean. But now it's been sold back to the chemical fiber corporations. That's very helpful to the earth. And the third one is many of them, and some of them have already invested new technology as to convert carbon dioxide to be PET yarns. And this company is the Far Eastern New Century. And they have this technology announced, and now the factory has already been invested, and now it's operated. Adidas and Nike has already placed orders to get this carbon dioxide converting to PET yarns. It's a very good business in Taiwan right now. And each of these corporations, from fiber companies to garment makers in overseas, each of them have already applied for green energy. What do I mean? Solar panels have been built up at the roof of the factories, and also plants will be growing in different factories. Particularly those materials. For example, when garment makers, they are doing the garment making, and they have so many disposed materials. Every factory now has been collected and recycled back for this recycled materials source. So in Taiwan, sustainability, we have been doing a lot, but we found the fact is it's just at the beginning. we have still a lot that can do it.
Thank you very much. Justin, without further ado, I really continue to ask the same question from our friends Mr. Vasirani and Mr. Palmer, one or the other first. I think they have prepared a presentation, if I'm not mistaken. Here we go. Wonderful. Okay. So really the floor is yours. Guide us through your presentation. We can't hear you yet. Yes, now we can hear you.
All right. Then I want to say hello, Dr. Schindler, and namaste to Mr. Singh and fellow participants there. Thank you on behalf of the Rhineland for giving us this opportunity to share, but also to learn from all of you. You started off talking about the trends in trade in Asia. Mr. Singh already had his opinion with regards to what's happening in Vietnam and Bangladesh and how India and its workforce can also be competitive at the same time. Our role is that of an independent third party. What we do on a daily basis is we go to manufacturing facilities, we check the products which are being prepared for export based on certain standards. We test many of these products in our laboratory on different data points, on quality, performance, chemical aspects. And our auditors are going into facilities to see how is the production process. What we have experienced in terms of demand is similar to what you would have seen from reports. When we see that Vietnam textile production is growing, and now they are number 2 in the world, we saw the same. We had to double our capacity in Vietnam for auditing, for testing. We see similar demand in Bangladesh. We would hope and want to see similar demand for our independent testing, auditing services in India too, like elsewhere. Now, on one hand, it's this clarity on the changing trends in trade. We heard about athleisure products and sportswear going up. We heard earlier from a panelist, Mr. Arun, of how Sri Lanka is strong in that aspect. Yeah, a lot of these products use man-made materials, synthetic material, and India is strong in manufacturing those materials. So there is one potential. Then we also heard from Mr. Justin, where he spoke about sustainability. Let's go a little deeper into what we see in terms of trade requirements for products from the sustainability aspects. One of the driving factor is this policy initiative coming from Europe, which is one of these strong countries that comes up with regulations before others. It's also one of the big destinations for textile and fashion products made by many countries in Asia. Now, as part of the overall Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan, there's a strategy on textiles, which requires more recycled materials, but also more recyclable garments. It also talks about reducing the amount of microplastics being shed from these garments. So that depends on the type of stitch and finishing, and of how circular business models should be incentivized in Europe, but also how these more circular products should be incentivized. And perhaps some of these more circular products could be coming from India. What we also see is in the area of digitalization is that Europe has come forward and they have made it clear that there has to be a digital product passport for several products, including textiles, which puts the focus on transparency. So it's very easy for companies today, large manufacturers. So you see the largest ones being Inditex, H&M, Fast Retailing, and so on. All of them are publishing their annual sustainability reports. Their investors want them to act on ESG, on addressing water risk, social risk, environmental risk, emissions, and so on. And a lot of this depends on data, which investors want. So this is also linked to this visibility and transparency, which comes in the shape of product passport. India, being a tech powerhouse, of course, has the possibility to provide that infrastructure so that the entire ecosystem, raw material producer, chemical manufacturer, vendor, tier 1 suppliers, at least on India level, are able to share and exchange information digitally, which makes it easier for the buyer to say, that's one country which has this data visible, so let's move ahead. Now, what we see ahead is this topic of cooperation between, on one hand, industry initiatives, but also policy measures. One of them also came from India. But the beauty now is how academia plays a role. We heard earlier from Mr. Singh about skilling the workforce. Yeah. So in addition to the basic education, we talk of vocational training. Now, one of the advantage that Bangladesh and Vietnam has because of its LDC status or free trade agreements with Europe is that they also get funding on these international capacity development programs from the like of GIZ, the German International Cooperation Agency, which brings together academia, industry, government policy makers to have this regional exchange. It includes Bangladesh, Pakistan, Vietnam, Cambodia. Can our policy makers also raise hand and say, hey, please include India too? And there's good reason for that. We see this example where this GIZ funded project from the German government allowed Bangladesh to prepare a national chemical management policy or guidelines for the textile industry earlier this year. What this means is it lays a level playing field. What it means is overall, a large proportion of Bangladeshi manufacturers will now be aligned with industry demand and requirements. We see something similar happening as of now in August in South Africa, where they come up with an overall policy guideline for the sector to address emissions, chemicals, waste, and so on. We also see this demand on focus on green claims, validation of these claims. So that's something where Indian policymakers were to already demand and set a level playing field with eco-labels aligned with what's expected in Europe could give us an edge. Yeah? An aspect to look at is the wealth that we can derive from textile waste. India today is the #1 importer of textile scraps. We know what happens in Panipat. We know what happens in Tirupur from overseas imported textile scrap, and add to this what is generated locally. Perhaps we can incentivize, look at this sector, develop industrial zones to support recycling here, and perhaps give out more recycle or circular products to the world. And the access of finance, you mentioned already, it's an important aspect. Sometimes these investment horizons are not 1 or 2 years, but 5 or 6 years. How together WWF and other initiatives like ITRA and others, we provide incentives to the industry so that they be able to invest on better chemical, more energy efficient machinery, water efficient machinery. This is from our survey, wherein we asked the audience what do they see as roadblocks, and what we see is lack of supporting regulations. We heard from Mr. Singh that there are several initiatives. Then perhaps there's a need to educate the market a little bit more. Perhaps there's a need for case studies of showcasing how regulations, together with local experts, access to finance, can support industry so that it goes mass scale. And now let's have a very quick look at one particular aspect of regulation, which is chemical related REACH. Shivendra, if you can, based in Gurgaon, if you can tell us a little bit about what you observe with our clients in India and how they are preparing for these international chemical regulation, the mother of all chemical requirements.
Yeah, thank you, Rakesh, and thanks everyone for giving this opportunity to speak on this platform. When we talk about the REACH regulations, it is one of the important regulation for the European clients. Whenever it's related to the manufacturers, within the supply chain, the importers and downstream users also, to follow that particular regulation, that whatever the chemicals, whether it is used in any articles, whether it is apparels and all that, or any substance, different types of chemicals, mixture of different types of chemicals, if it is more than 1 ton per year, so it is a requirement that that need to be registered on the particular as per the ICA guideline. So why we are discussing about that also, I will just tell how it is connected with India also when we talk about the REACH regulation. So it is very important thing, and as we are talking about to get the good practice from the other countries and to adopt the same in our India region. So that's why I'm talking about that. So related to that, like if it is more than 1 ton, so it is need to be registered, that thing. And there is a specific list of hazardous parameter because everyone talk about sustainability. So it is required that while dyeing the apparels and all that things, it is mandatory that we have to use the non-hazardous chemical, even procure the chemical which are non-hazardous from the chemical manufacturer and all that thing. And it is mandatory, even in our India, all the manufacturers are following this guideline for the REACH, that whatever the restricted substance, like we are talking about HVHC, there are 224 HVHCs nowadays as per the European regulations. So it should be less than 0.01%. And there is one good thing that just like in our India, that to provide the information to our consumer, there they are following. There is one app is available that is called as a Toxproof app is there. With the help of that, any consumer can directly connected with the manufacturer and asking about what type of chemical which are restricted is present in their particular product. And now when we talk about the SCIP, that is also connected with the REACH. It is a waste frame directive because now earlier Mr. Rakesh and all other panelists are talking about the recycling and all that. So it is mandatory that the waste operator who is dealing with this for recycling and all that reuse, so they should know and get the information about what type of hazardous chemical in that. So the REACH basic principle is that no data, no market. So it is that is the main thing why I'm just connecting it with India, because I just came into my notice that Indian National Chemical Authority, which is working on the chemical management and safety rule, that is called as Indian REACH regulation. They are also working on the same principle of European REACH, and it is working since 2010, I remember, and still the process is going on. And soon, I think in India also, this particular thing is implemented related to, they have prepared the list also of a restricted substance. There is the same criteria of greater than 1 ton per year for the manufacturer, importer and all that. So it is a good thing which India will adopt and follow, such like other neighbor country, like when we talk about Saudi or UAE also, they have very strict guidelines about the certain parameters and all that. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palmer, and also our friend, Mr. One second, I need to get the names right. Vasirani. And also thank you, Justin and Aaron from the Sri Lanka Apparel Exporter Association. Unfortunately, we are running out of time and we have to come to an end. Before handing over again to Mr. Singh to conclude the meeting, I would just really highlight a few takeaways, I think, that I take away from this session and which I like to emphasize. I think a really important trend is really sustainability, and I know it's a catchword and it has been used many times and in the last 10 years, but what we have seen in the last few years is an acceleration of regulation that is coming to hit our industry like a tsunami that we all have to be prepared for. The regulation coming from Europe especially is a very good example on how this will really hit our industry, and it's already happening, and I know from our discussions in Europe also that the industry is struggling very much to handle all that regulation that is coming in all the different facets, whether it's fibers, whether it's chemicals, whether it's recycling requirements. That is something we really have to take away from today's meeting. Another important trend, I think, that was highlighted by Justin is really innovation. If you want to create value, you have to innovate. Whether it's innovation in textiles, innovation in fibers, in garment production, you have to make use of the digital tools that are available, the digital possibilities that have evolved during the pandemic, virtual tools that are available, that were not available, that have been really put to the forefront in the last 2 years. And you have to start using those tools very quickly, start small, and get acquainted with these technologies as soon as possible. Another important catch or takeaway for me also today is that we have to collaborate. That doesn't only mean, between companies or between regions, but especially along the supply chain. At our conference, for example, next month in Davos in Switzerland, we have invited a few examples how companies from the brands and retailers, Adidas or H&M, are collaborating with established companies, but also with startup companies. These companies, they don't wait until new innovation has actually established itself in the market. They are actually buying into startups to own those innovations at a very early stage. And I can only recommend to all of us to look how you can cooperate along the supply chain with your immediate suppliers or customers, but also to go beyond your suppliers and your customers. Like a garment producer has to work together maybe with a fiber producer, how to recycle, how to design garments, and which fibers they need to use to be able to recycle those garments later on, and how to design garments in the first place so that it becomes recyclable. And finally, let me say that the trends that we have, identified today will only be handleable, will only be converted into new ideas and new value if the government supports the industry in the different countries. It's not that our industry can do everything ourselves if it is not supported by governments. Wherever we go and wherever I travel, the key to the success of the industry that it is supported by government, by government regulation that is supporting the industry in the country, but that is also aligned with initiatives in other areas. And to do that, the government has to be really on the forefront of regulation. You see that in Europe, and you see that in many other countries. Therefore, I really encourage the government in India, but also elsewhere. We have seen it from Taiwan. We have seen it in China, of course, in the last 20 years, how the government played a pivotal role in promoting the industry. With that, I thank you for your attention, and I ask Mr. Singh to conclude the meeting. Thank you.
Very interesting presentations. In fact, sustainability is the area where we all should work more. As for the government, in the Ministry of Textile also, we have been thinking that we are largely sustainable because we are mainly dealing in the natural fiber, which is biodegradable and all. We discounted the dyes and chemicals and other thing which was part of our story. And although the environment regulations like the National Green Tribunal's order and all for the zero discharge and all, we thought that we are properly taken care of. But now we can see that so many more things are coming up. We are also diversifying into man-made fiber and all, and we have to do a lot. So what I feel that the ministry, which has been confining its role for the industry promotion, I think has quite a lot has been done already. The regulations, the policy measures are already in place. So it's for the industry to take advantage of those. But we have to collaborate more on the sustainability front. Because in government also there are other departments and ministries also dealing with this matter, because environment, pollution, the climate change is such a big issue that there are so many ministries dealing with that. Even urbanization, the recycling is part of urbanization process and all, the urban development and all, the municipal authorities, the segregation of the waste and all. So somehow we link with the municipal authorities to the recyclers and all. So more recycling will start happening, because that's the area we have to focus. So I will urge the city and other textile federations also to have a look at that, and we can collaborate. If required, we can go for some bigger study. How can we do, which we have not been doing in this sector? Because we have taken up sustainability as a subject recently. In the ministry, sustainability was not in the focus 6 months or a year back, but now it is. So, but we can do much more on that. That's the thing, and we are very keen to work on that. So that's the thing. So my thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and I really like this discussions which we had it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now, may I request the chairman of the session, Mr. V.K. Singh, to felicitate our moderator, Dr. Christian Schindler. A big thank you to all our our panelists who have joined virtually. And may I request, sorry, yeah, we'll do that. As of now, virtual felicitations to our virtual panelists. And may I request Mr. Rakesh Mehra, Deputy Chair, to felicitate our Chair, Mr. V.K. Singh.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you to all our panelists and participants.